Steve Harris from White Maiden and British Lion. You listen to Andrew McCasebit from Scars and Guitars.
G'day everybody, welcome to the show. I'm pleased to bring you an episode featuring Tim Charles from the Melbourne group Ne Obliviscaris. Now the catalyst for the chat with Tim is due to an Australian tour. They have teamed up with Psycroptic and they will be playing across June throughout our wide brown land. And because bugger all of you actually listen from Australia, I won't go through the dates now, but as usual, I'll put all such information, including links to tickets, in the episode description. So the matter at hand, an opportunity to talk with Tim is a good one because there's plenty to discuss in addition to the tour. They've got a new vocalist in addition to Tim. James Dorton is making his Australian debut performances. You know, Tim formed Ne Obliviscaris a long time ago. He's been at it now as long as anybody could be in Australia, and he certainly deserves every accolade that the band has earned over the past decade or so as they have navigated the limelight, and it hasn't always been easy. There was an instance where they stared down cancel culture, and you'll hear all about Tim's take on what happened back in 2017. The catalyst for pursuing a career in the creative industries, you'll hear all about that as well. What gives him the drive to stick to his plan? Where does inspiration come from? Habits and routines, it's all here. Tim is a very articulate fellow, so this is one of those episodes I'd like you to sit down, grab some tea or coffee or maybe even something to smoke and enjoy, because here he is. It's Tim from Ne Obliviscaris.
Hello, Andrew. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can, mate. How are you going?
Not too bad. How about yourself?
Good. I always start my chats this way, mate, and it's unusual for me to talk to someone from Australia, I've got to say, which is ironic. But, mate, how have the Zoom has been going for you?
Good. Yeah, it's all been going well. Always good to have a chat about what we're doing with the band and the stuff we've got coming up, especially when it's here in Australia.
So Chris is just organising domestic conversations for you, or you've got some people abroad as well?
Yeah, Chris handles all our publicity for Australia. And then we work with, Season of Mist, our record label often hooks up publicity for Europe and USA. We were just in the USA doing a tour there. So, but Chris handles everything here for us.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. So how was that tour, mate? Did it meet expectations?
Yeah, it was fantastic. It was a great opportunity to go and play not just for our fans, but also for a whole bunch of other people that, didn't necessarily know who we were. It was on a big package with 7 bands all up, Cradle of Filth, Dying Fetus, Flesh God Apocalypse, ourselves, a few others. And, it meant that, we're playing to 1,000, 1,500 people, whatever it was, pretty much every night. And every single day there was some people in the crowd that were becoming new fans, that were hearing us for the first time, that weren't there for us, that were there for one of the other great bands playing. And that was really the reason why we did the tour. It was one of those things where we kind of talked about it amongst the band of a tour like that feels a little bit more like an investment tour because you're investing in the band's fan base, so then you can come back and headline and hopefully a lot more people come along. So that was really good. And, we finished it off with 3 shows in Mexico, a couple headline shows there included and a festival. And that's always really fun. Mexico, the crowds there are absolutely crazy and definitely some of the best in the world. So it was a fun time and a good chance to play the set that we're doing in Australia as well, because we were doing kind of the same show in Mexico that we're doing in Australia coming up.
Did you get a chance to catch up and talk to Marek and Zoe from Cradle?
Yes. Marek, we've done about, 85 shows with Cradle of Filth over the last decade or something like that, because our first ever US tour was opening for them our first European club tour was opening for them as well. And so Marek we've known going way back then, because he's been the guitarist in Cradle for a long time. Zoe we just met more recently, seeing this was the first time we toured with them since she's been in the band. But yeah, it was really nice to tour with them and catch up with the man himself, Danny Filth, as well. And just everyone.
Did you have to deal with Des at all from Coal Chamber, their manager?
No, I didn't personally. Basically, for a tour like that, Chaos and Carnage, we're mostly dealing with the festival organizers, who are then dealing with the individual band's management. And I manage Ne Obliviscaris, so I'm the kind of one dealing with the festival. The only little exception to that is, the tour manager on the tour was from Dying Fetus, so we had a little bit more interaction with some of Dying Fetus's a crew, as well as the festivals. But all was nice and smooth, and everyone got along really well, which was great.
That band name rolls off the tongue when you've got to talk to your bank manager, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's always that thing, or it's like it's like when I tell my dad, like, who are you touring with? Oh, Flesh God, Apocalypse, Cradle of Filth, and Dying Fetus, and he'll just look at me like, what are you talking about? But it's whatever floats your boat. There's lots of different ways to make good music and ways to go about it.
Look, at the end of the day, it's when I say it's just a business, of course it is a business. You're playing this music, but the pointy end of the spear that you got to focus on these days is keeping the show on the road. So I've spoken to all of these bands that you mentioned, and we have had a chat once before, and you guys ultimately, the creative is one thing, the creative artifact is one thing, but it's actually the business side of things that I imagine keeps you up at night and keeps you have to be probably more focused on that than the creative side of things.
Yeah, you know what? I saw a friend of mine today, Jessie Spin, a dancer who was in our Grail video. She shared on Instagram some story about, someone kind of being very frustrated about being an artist, but having to do all the admin work, and that's very much, especially for me, I've been running the business for this band from the beginning. I've been managing the band for a long time, and that is, what I do full time when we're not on the road. And it is very much that running the business and making sure the business and the financial aspect of the band is running. That is something that basically takes up, 80-90% of my time, and then the rest is, okay, now I've got to carve out some time to write new songs and practice my parts and all of that sort of stuff. So, it's definitely been an incredible thing to be able to do this band. I always think in more recent times that my new dream is to be able to have more time to be able to do the art and not have to juggle as much. But having said that, it's always a wonderful thing to be working on a project that you helped start, that I've been doing since 2003, and I get an enormous amount of satisfaction. I like working on the music industry, the music business side of things. I find it really interesting to do the management side of things, and as much as financial spreadsheets can be a little bit mind-numbing at times, I do find it a fun challenge to try and solve the problems of, how do you actually make money in the music industry in 2025? Because it is getting harder and harder every year, without a doubt.
Okay. I'm going to come back to that, actually. So I'm going to bookmark that one there. I want to ask you about Psycroptic, though. Are you mates with the Haley brothers?
Yeah. I mean, personally, I'm not like super close with the guys, but we've known them for many years. Some of the other guys, like our drummer Dan, has been friends with Dave, going back many, many years, and we've known them forever. And they're a band in the scene that really inspired us a lot when we were first starting out. They're one of the kings of the local metal scene when we were starting out, and they're still just such an incredible band, so tight. Their last couple albums, I just absolutely love, and they're one of the few bands where within Ne Obliviscaris, we all just love them, and so it's really quite an honor to have them on this tour with us.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah, it's a great pairing. Look, there might be somebody else out there that I haven't remembered to talk about here, but you're both more or less the most prominent metal bands in the country right now. I know you're a modest guy, but still, that's the way that I look at it. So, was this an obvious pairing?
Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you. I mean, it's always nice to be recognized for what we're doing. I mean, I think that it always depends on how you define metal. Like, I always kind of refer to the metal scene with an asterisk of like, if you take out anything that doesn't have a core in the genre, because obviously the metalcore, deathcore scene is quite a different scene here in Australia, and it is enormous. And there's a bunch of bands in that scene that are a lot bigger than we are. But yeah, within the rest of the metal scene, us, Psycroptic, Bellacore, another one, Caligula's Horse. I mean, Carnival, you might not consider them metal, but from the heavy music scene, there's some other incredible bands from a range of different genres. I mean, we're really quite spoiled here in Australia with so many great bands. But, I mean, when we were trying to think about what to do for this tour, I mean, part of the reasoning in looking towards Psycroptic was we wanted to look towards the Australian scene, because the last couple of times we've toured in Australia, we've mostly had international bands opening up for us. Last time it was Rivers of Nile and The Ocean. The tour before that, we had Caligula's Horse, who were Australian, but we had three other bands, Allegiant, Beyond Creation, Rivers of Nile, who were all from overseas as well. And we really thought it would be cool to actually to pair up with one of the great Australian metal bands and, bring that into place. Beyond that, we're also getting, local openers for each of the shows, which we're going to be announcing later this week. And that's something that we're really excited about, because we haven't had the chance actually to give a local Aussie metal band the chance to open up for us for many years. And, we know one of the first shows that we got to open that was a really big deal, was opening for Psycroptic. I think it was about 2007 or 2008, something like that. So, it is important, I think, to pay it forward and, shine a light on the great Australian metal scene that we have.
Yeah, you're not wrong on that one. Yeah. What about you've chosen, reading from the press, you've chosen to perform Citadel, and I might mispronounce the album name here, but is it Exul or Exul?
Yeah, Exul. Yeah.
Exul. Okay. So you're performing them in full, and you got a 2-hour set. So it's pretty ambitious. And I imagine you're going to have a bunch of people looking at the bass player's fingers to make sure that he plays all of the triads and everything else that is as all of the full-on musos tend to. But something like this, is this a different preparation for you physically and mentally?
It is. We did this set list for the first time in Europe last October, November, not really knowing if we could pull it off. It was just something I pitched to the guys, being like, hey, I reckon this would be really exciting for fans. And then some of the guys were like, hold on, but how are we going to play 2 hours? But, when I kind of looked at, I kind of sold it to the guys of like, hey, well, like there's probably a similar amount of metal or blast beats or whatever compared to our normal show, which was about 100 minutes the year before, because some of the extra things we're doing are these wonderful shorter pieces that we often don't get a chance to play live, like the beginning and ending pieces in Painters of the Tempest from Citadel, or Anhedonia from Exul, which is like the kind of short piece that marks as the outro for that record, only about 3 minutes long. And a lot of these pieces are not metal tracks. It creates this real up and down nature to the show with these, with an increased number of, I guess, breaks from the endless, kicks and blast beats and stuff like that you would normally have. So, when we did that in Europe, the thing that we we found though was that, after a week or so, we got used to the show and we were able to do it really well. It was just finding that rhythm for it. The thing that we kind of realized was that we couldn't do much else as far as through the day, so it was trying to organize the tour in a way so that, we had as much of the rest of the day looked after. So we're not having to spend a long time there for sound checks. So we're not having to spend, a long time hanging around before or after the show and those sort of things, because it is a very taxing, exhausting show. For me, singing a 2-hour show, means that for the rest of the day, I don't talk much.
Yeah.
I'm saving my voice for that. And so really just demanded, I think, a new level of professionalism, which I really enjoyed. And, it was a fun thing to see a lot of Australians complaining, hey, bring this tour to Australia. And so we thought, okay, here we are.
It's also an opportunity for you to, or for James to, am I correct in saying this is his first run of Australian shows with the group?
Yeah. So James is, he's been touring with the band for 2 years now. He only officially became a member in January this year. But the only tour that, Zen did with us in the last couple of years was the Australian tour in September 2023. So that means that this is actually James's Australian debut, which, we're really excited to show him off. He's an incredible live performer, incredible vocalist. And so, it's going to be a really, fantastic thing to finally have him here and show off what he can do to the Australian audiences. And just very excited for him to have the chance as well to get to see what the Australian crowds are like, because it's always a special time.
Okay, yeah, 2 years. So he's well and truly worn in. Was it a process? You're seasoned, I get that, but still introducing somebody after a fairly charismatic member of the band exits can be fraught. Did you find that, or did you find that it just happened?
Yeah. So, initially, back in May 2023, we had to find a fill-in vocalist on like 10 days notice when Zen unfortunately had to pull out of our European tour. And, we'd paid for everything. It was booked. We were going to lose tens of thousands of dollars if we canceled it. And, we're thinking like, who are we friends with that is an amazing vocalist that might not already be on the road? And, we knew James from his time in Black Crown Initiate. They had supported us in the US back in 2016 on our first US headline tour. And, we were just so grateful that he was able to help us out and jump on that tour. Now, the thing with that was that we very much just viewed it as him filling in as a once-off. So we were just trying to make the best of it for that tour. And then we were really pleasantly surprised that he naturally was just fitting in so well with the group, like personality-wise and also on stage. Then obviously after time, when Zen's like return kept getting delayed, we spent a lot more time then really trying to fine tune what the show was like with James there on stage. And the really exciting thing with that was that it's a rare thing that you get a chance to like test drive a prospective band member for like a year and a half. But that is what we got the chance to do. And we're like, hey, well, we've got James, his next tour and the tour after that. So let's keep fine tuning the show. And as amazing as he is and Zen is as well, they're very different. And so it meant that the interaction on stage, the way that we ran the show as kind of the dual frontmen, his energy is very different to Zen's, and it connected with me in a different way. And so that was something that, we took our time to slowly work on. And we were super excited when we realized the heights that we thought the show was now reaching. So that gave us the benefit that when Zen did decide to make the decision that to step down from his position in the band in January this year, we already knew that we had a ready-made, vocalist that we knew did a great job and that we were more than comfortable with. So from that perspective, because we had that long period of time to kind of test him out, it's been very smooth as a result.
So he doesn't cook tin tuna on the tour bus or anything like that?
No, the only thing that some of my guys will give him a bit of shit over the amount of protein that he takes.
Oh, God.
There's always a thing of protein powder about this big on the bus. But a few of my guys are very much like that, down at the gym at 10 o'clock every morning, even when we're on the tour.
Oh, brutal. Yeah.
And so, each to their own. And as long as people can turn up and put on a great show every night, that's all I really care about, to be honest.
It's beside the point, but I remember working with a couple who used to slam those protein shakes and their breath absolutely stank. So hopefully his is he's better than what you're the bloke who has to stand up there next to him, he's singing and you cop it all. So
yes, no, I can confirm that no, his oral hygiene is totally fine.
All right. Years ago, we did talk about Brendan Brown and the circumstances upon which he was removed from the band. And I stress, and I had this battle with a fucking editor from down in Melbourne, the allegations of domestic abuse. Nothing was charged. There was nothing on record. Now, that's almost a decade ago now, if you can believe it, 2017, I think it was. So what can you talk about now from that episode that, frankly, the media environment wouldn't allow, and also you didn't feel equipped to discuss back then?
Yeah, it's crazy that it's 8.5 years ago now, which feels like a lifetime ago, whilst also being, very, still very, I guess, present, when it gets brought up or thought about. To be honest, there's nothing really more to say on that. I think that, at the time, it was obviously incredibly difficult circumstances for everyone involved. And as a band and as an individual, I'm always just looking to try to work out how to do the best and the right thing by everyone involved as best as you can. And that's the reality. And so obviously, we had discussions at that time on our end, making sure that we knew what as much as we could to make decisions that we felt were necessary. And, in the end, we were, comfortable with the decision that we made. And, and often there's more things that go into things when someone leaves a band. Often it's not just, one thing that comes up, even if it might be a different topic or unrelated issues, So I think from that perspective, there's not really too much to add, but it is one of those challenging scenarios where I think it's important to, it's difficult because, the reason why cancel culture exists is because of people, in particular women, not being able to have their perpetrators held to account in an enormously high percentage of scenarios. And so, the reality is that it's important to make sure that women are listened to as best as possible in these scenarios, whilst at the same time, you have to make decisions on what you actually know to be true based on your private and personal conversations with these people. And that's not necessarily for the public, the conversations that you have in these scenarios, but you just, have those conversations as best as you can, and then try to make good decisions that you feel are respectful and of everything that's happened, and move forward from there.
I reckon you handled it the best out of any band that has had the eye of Sauron on them from the leftist media so far. Okay, I'll give you that.
Yeah, well, I think that, it's definitely always an imperfect way to go about these things. It's, Yeah, it's definitely one of those very imperfect things to try to handle, because there's a lot to consider, and to make sure that you aren't jumping to conclusions without proper evidence, but at the same time that you're really listening to people who are saying that they've had negative experiences, and taking that seriously, and holding both of those things to make sure that any outcome is as just as possible is all you can do as an individual who is not a court or a justice system, because that's, of course, the reality with these sort of things.
You didn't throw Brendan under the bus, though. I'm a journo, so I remember reading into it, and I remember writing an article after our conversation, the last one, and the editor of a shithead magazine took me to task over the language that I decided to use in it, because Brendan wasn't charged with anything. And but you guys were put in a very difficult situation where if you didn't let him go, you would have been cancelled. In 2017 and 18 is when that stuff was at it's been bad since, but it was on the ascent, wasn't it? And if there was a whisper of that type of thing, the band was thrown under the bus and the social media vultures came at you, etc., which I'm sure they did anyway. But my question amongst all of that was, what was the main thing you learned from that experience?
The main thing I learned from that experience. I guess one of the main things I learned was that sometimes when people have sometimes people can mean well and still do something that is really harmful. And so, that was the reality in that scenario for me, when there was, false allegations in regards to myself, saying that I was aware of things and that I'd covered up and these sort of things, allegations that were then recanted, and there were public apologies made. But a lot of that was an example of, people making, going A, B, Z, and there's these huge gaps, and they're guessing because it fits the narrative of what they think something might be. But look, so from that, it's like the thing I learned at the time was that social media can be a really, really, really horrible place. Like, it was incredibly traumatic, to be honest, for everyone in the band. I was getting nightmares for many weeks, just at the thought of hopping on social media through dealing with the whole thing. But having said that, I think it's really important to note that the reason these things are happening in society is because of the gross injustice that happens in so many of these scenarios, and that women have been so underrepresented when it comes to just outcomes in the justice system. So I hold that, and even some of the people who attacked me and then later apologized, as much as I was angry at the time, it is easy to forgive in those scenarios, knowing that those people generally meant well and maybe had gone through their own traumatic experiences, or maybe they had not seen justice for themselves or people that they knew. And then that gets attached to different online scenarios, which gets caught up in cancel culture. I think that obviously due process is really important. You can't expect people in the industry to be, the judge, jury, and executioner. Having said that, having certain moral standards within the way you run your band and your business is really important. And so, from that perspective, I think that, what that really shone a light on is to be making sure, that as an individual, as a band, that you're always being aware of the way that you're, not just the way you're acting, but the people around you acting. Sometimes as a guy, you see other guys, even just talking in disrespectful ways about women, and it can be difficult to call that out or call out behavior that might not be, might not be okay. And so it's finding the line and between having the courage to be a good man in the context of all of this stuff, and being true to yourself and your own values and your own morals, whilst at the same time, when it comes to the internet and what people think, sometimes you just have to take a step back and acknowledge that people are going to have their opinions on different things, and what you can control is how you behave and how you are, and that the people that know you best are the ones who can form judgment on that, and people on the internet, is that don't really know you, will say what they want. And for a lot of them about me, there's so many wonderful things that people say on the internet about me. So it goes both ways, but none of these people really know me that well on a personal level. And I just kind of keep remembering that, because if you pay too much attention to the top 10% or the bottom 10% of what people say about you, it's really bad for your own mental health. So one of the things that I kind of got out of that whole experience was to make sure that, over time I slowly learned how to look after myself better so that I could be a better man for those around me as well.
Yeah, well said. Something else, though, is that you didn't fold. You didn't offer an apology where the one shouldn't have been issued and warranted. And a lot of people do fold, and they give in to the mob in this way. And as I think when you do that, you embolden the mob, and they just go even harder. And the way that I'm reframing what you said, but you're keeping everything in context to the seriousness of allegations, whilst not actually saying somebody did anything, but you're also highlighting it's a societal issue, but you're also saying it's got nothing to do with us, mate. And that was a very important line in the sand. And I'm going to credit you with this. You're a case study that other musicians can look to, because God knows you're all out on the road. Those poor blokes in Vogue, what's his band, Decapitated, were in prison in Washington State for allegations, just made up bullshit, just made up. So this is where the pendulum goes to the other side. It almost, I'm not going to go this far, but in a way it almost fell to you on your shoulders to actually say, hang on a sec, we're going to look at this in a different light, and you're not just going to give in to whatever the mob wants, because, the old Black Sabbath song, the mob rules. They just keep on coming after you. And in your own way, you have provided a template for which to manage and handle these things and still go on and have a thriving career.
Well, I mean, look, we just did the best that we could in the circumstances. I think that there's a difference between, justice in the courts versus justice within continuing in a band is different, because, someone doesn't need to do something proven beyond doubt in a court for you to say you don't want to play in a band with them anymore, and so that was the thing. Obviously we had our own internal discussions, were certain of enough to be very comfortable moving in a different direction, whilst at the same time, understanding more of the circumstances for someone that we had known for a long time. Brendan was like my little brother for many years, and so, that's that reality of, more of someone's circumstances when you know them really well. When it's a family member of yours that has, potentially done the wrong thing, you're more likely to want to understand what was going on with them, even if you don't condone it whatsoever. And so, I don't know how we handled it was necessarily a template or anything, but it was just us, trying as best as we could to do the right thing by everybody involved, and be respectful to the fact that we wanted to stand up for what we thought was right, and to be able to move forward in the direction that we thought was positive for us, and that was the right thing for us to do.
Yeah, copy. Really well said on all that point. I'll move on to another topic, and I've been wanting to ask you this. So, looking forward to this conversation for a few days. So I thought, for someone who's actually doing it, someone who's actually got a career playing hard rock, heavy metal, call it whatever you want to do, it's subversive music that the radio won't play, put it that way, and you have to earn your living through touring and merchandise sales. But for you, what was the catalyst for pursuing a career in the creative industries over a regular job?
Yeah, good question. I mean, when I was about 17, I'd been playing the violin since I was 7, and I basically decided after my year 11 in high school that I wanted to be a professional violinist. And I kind of dedicated myself during my last year of high school. I was practicing 3-4 hours violin a day. I was maybe doing less on some of my other subjects because I'd kind of decided that I was going to do music. And for me, that was the classical route. I was going to go to a conservatorium and study classical violin. And whilst at the same time, I was teaching myself to play guitar, and I thought maybe I'd sing and play guitar in a band, because I loved metal, punk, and hardcore and all that sort of stuff. Whilst I was at uni in 2003, that's when Ne Obliviscaris first started. And it was always one of those things where the next dream for me with the band was always kind of one step above where we were. I just wanted to play on stage and play some of songs that I helped to write. It was as simple as that. And then I wanted to play on the stages opening for the bands that I loved. I thought, how cool would that be? And then it was like, well, wouldn't it be so cool if we could be the headline act at those venues? And then if we could travel interstate, or then if we could travel overseas. And it was only after that, we're talking about more than a decade down the road, it was then like, oh, is there actually any way to make money off this? We hadn't made $1. Anytime we'd made money off a show, we just invested it back into the band. And so it was really only in 2014, 15 that, we started looking at touring the world and exploring, what do we do to actually make some money off this so that we can keep doing this? Because, it's obviously not sustainable to go do a tour and lose money every time, especially when you have a family, when you have kids, that sort of stuff, which, a couple of us do. And so it was just that kind of problem solving of how do we do that in a way that helps the band continue to have opportunities to grow and hopefully get there some way.
Were your family supportive? Like, were your parents supportive of your ambitions?
Yeah. My parents definitely were. My mom, I remember, once asked me the question of like how, how after 20 years of classical training, you're now doing this? And it wasn't meant in a negative way. It was like a curious way of how I kind of went down that path. I always had my head in the clouds. I always was a very ambitious, you could say delusional person of I was literally when I was 17, I'm I'm going to be a world famous violinist, that's what I'm going to do. And, but I wasn't delusional in the sense of not understanding that it was hard work. It was more why not me? I'm pretty good. If I do 3-4 hours violin practice a day, if I outwork everybody else combined with whatever natural talent I have, why not me? It was always that attitude of it wasn't thinking that I'm better. It was more, why is everyone else better? Why can't I do that if they can do it? And that was just the way that I looked at life, the way I looked at music, the way I looked at bands. And, I was grateful that my parents never told me to pull my head out of the clouds and go get a real job, and supported me, being a ragtag artist instead.
Yeah, more power to them for doing that. That's for sure. So, but to do all of this, you've got to be inspired. So where do you think your creativity, the inspiration for your creativity comes from?
I think the main inspiration for me personally has come from the love and the obsession with music. So I love music, and I have been obsessed with so many bands over the years. It's been, I was that fanboy in the front row, screaming my lungs out for my favorite band, night after night. When I was, as soon as I turned 18, I was going to shows every single week. I was going to local shows, international shows. I'm going to hip hop, jazz, classical, heavy metal, punk. I didn't care. Like I just looked for great music, great art wherever I could, and I found some of it just about in every genre. I kind of keep picking up genres the older I get, I think. In high school, I mostly listened to punk, hardcore, and metal, and it was only, funnily enough, after I got into my 20s that I started getting into, I guess, some more pop stuff or more mainstream stuff over time. And so, yeah, I think it's just that love of music and of art. And so there's so many different musicians that have inspired me and made me want to then create my own art in response to that.
So what habits and routines do you have in place that help you cultivate your creativity?
Well, I mean, I think that one of the most important things, like before you're creative, is to invest in the technique of whatever your chosen instrument is. So to be able to be creative, there needs to be a link between what is in your mind and the ideas that you have and the instrument that you choose to express them in. So as a violinist and a singer, I also play a little bit of piano. I used to play a bit of guitar, not that much these days. It was always about trying to develop enough technique so when I had an idea, I could actually play it or sing it or whatever. So the first thing is always to practice for years. and the longer you do that, the greater that connection between any potential ideas, bringing them into the real life becomes more possible. But beyond that, it's also then just doing it. So, when I was 18, 19, I discovered jazz, I discovered improvisation, and I used to just jam over my favorite jazz recordings, and there'd be John Coltrane or Stephen Grappelli or Miles Davis or Jean-Luc Ponty, these people, and they'd get to the solo, and I'd just make up my own solo. And it sucked at first. It really did. If you listen to these recordings, it was bad, but I'm just an 18-year-old kid trying to work out how to improvise. But I would do this for hours. I would do this for hours and hours for years. And eventually I didn't suck anymore, and I got to be not bad and then pretty good, and then I'll let other people judge, if I got much further beyond that. But that was really the thing of just doing it, practicing being creative, practicing just trying to make that connection between ideas in my head and my instrument. And then beyond that, in the more like present day, it's more about creating space. So when I'm really busy, I don't write. If I'm always listening to music, if I'm always working, if I'm always doing something, if I'm on my phone, or if I'm watching TV, I'm not going to write. But if I go out on a walk for 45 minutes and I don't take my phone and I don't walk with urgency to get anywhere, I just walk with enjoyment of that I'm going outside to just be outside and just enjoy that experience. That sort of spaciousness that is created in the mind of not doing anything for like a goal, that's the sort of space that really unlocks my creativity. It's a sort of thing, it's the reason why, people come up with ideas or problem solve or creative ideas if they have a long shower or something like that. You're just standing there because your mind is wandering.
Yep.
When your mind wanders, it creates creative, connections. And so allowing space for your mind to wander is one of the keys to creativity. And I can't stress that enough because it's mind wandering that is in scarcity in today's society because we're always filling it with our phones.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
And so just put the phone away is going to be one of the best things you can do to enable those creative juices to flow.
Hence why you are the driving force by one of the most successful bands to come out of the country for the past 2 decades or so. So do you get people asking you for advice, or a better way to frame that is, when people ask you for advice, what sort of wisdom do you share with them?
I mean, I do from time to time. I think that the number one key thing I would tell people is to make sure you stick at it for an extended period of time if it's something you really want to do. So if you find something like music, you really want to do it, dedicate yourself for a significant amount of time, because the way you get good at anything is through thousands of hours of work. We spent more than a decade. We would rehearse every Sunday here in Melbourne, Australia, from 12 till 5 every Sunday at a local rehearsal studio called the Dane Centre for a decade. And this was like literally 45 weeks a year. We would do that. And that's not exaggerating. That was our life. And my family, my friends, girlfriend or whatever, they knew Sunday, Tim's busy Sunday during the day, just every week. And it was that dedication because we weren't that good when we started. That's the other thing I tell to people. Find a video, of us from like 2006 on stage. We weren't very good. Like our songwriting wasn't too bad. Like we had written some songs that would become good songs, but we weren't great performers. We weren't. It took us many years to get to where we are now. And the one thing I notice is that, the one thing I notice is that we essentially are surrounded by bands on tour that have gotten to where they are through many, many years of work. And it's rare for me to see a band that I think is great that hasn't been at it for many, 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 many years. And so however good you think you are, keep at it for many years and show that dedication, because that's where the results come.
So what do you wish you knew back then in 2006 when you're standing on stage playing pretty bloody good songs, but to your point, you're just not quite the formed article that you have in your mind that you take for granted these days?
I mean, I'd like to think that I don't take anything for granted these days, but I think that the really special thing was just when we first started playing live, just the ability to write a song, get on stage, and discover that some people that you've never met before like it. Not just your mom or your brother or something or your friends. And I really try to keep that in my mind because, on our last tour, you're jumping up on stage, there's 1,000 people there every day, and it's very easy for that to become normal and not special. But it is special. And so I do actively remind myself of that. That's something that, I try to do a bunch of journaling and, it's something I actively write about and remind myself, because sometimes you forget. Sometimes, it's like, oh man, I'm tired. I have to push today to do it. And then you realize that there's a reason why you're pushing, because this is a special thing and a privilege that you get to do.
All right, final question for you. What's your grandest hope for the future for the band?
I mean, I think that I would just love to have the sort of venues that we pack out in Australia, where we're slowly getting to the point where we're doing that everywhere in the world, but we're not quite everywhere. And I guess that's what I would just love to do. We're playing a lot of, 1,000 capacity venues. And it would just be such a special thing to know to be able to do that wherever we go around the world, because I know that when you're pulling those crowds in any market, you can make enough money to go back each time and do that every album. And then it becomes a long-standing career. And we really are not too far away from that. And Australia has been so good to us. It's been such a special thing. And so, it's just really that one next step of, like we always have, the grandest dream is just the next one. And then if we achieve that, then I'm sure I'll come up with another dream, whilst still trying to be grateful for where we are in that moment.
Hopefully an enterprising promoter or the Festival of Sydney or whatever it is gets in touch with you and you get an opportunity to play at the Opera House, because you're one Australian band that deserves to do that, and I really hope that happens.
Yeah, maybe we'll get the Sydney Symphony Orchestra or something like that to team up with us, or we'll see. The band probably has to grow a little bit more to get to that level, but I'm I'm sure we could write something that would sound amazing in that venue. So, I've definitely got that in the back of my mind that sort of thing would be fun to do. So, we'll see what the future holds.
Look forward to that live album when it comes out then. There you go.
Yeah.
Thanks, mate, for the chat. Yeah, it's been a great one. I appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you very much, Andrew. I appreciate you.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Tim as much as I enjoyed participating in it. I look forward to our next one. There's plenty of topics yet to cover with Tim. It's not a meteoric rise. It's quite the opposite, actually. It was a slow burn, and they've managed to capture the attention of a lot of metal fans worldwide. So long may their ascendancy continue. So hopefully in a couple of years, another opportunity presents itself because, it'd be good to reprise some of those topics and expand. All right, that's it from me. My name is Andrew Mackay-Smith, and I'm the host of Scars and Guitars. Until the next one, it's a goodbye for now.